Hi everyone, my name is Stefan Wiefling and this is joint work together with Luigi Loiacono, also from HBRS University of Applied Sciences, and Markus Dürmuth from Ruhr University Bochum. We're talking about passwords, and I mean passwords are just deployed everywhere on all the websites worldwide, and we can't get away with them because they're like easy to implement, and also from a user perspective, if you see these login fields, you know what to do. But however, the security risks in passwords have just increased in the last couple of years because you can basically get, you have these password databases that just got stolen from popular websites, and an attacker can just buy these databases from the black market and so on and automatically enter them on the website. And because we're just human beings, and I play guilty in that as well, we're just reusing passwords across websites. And if that's the case and you automatically enter them, you will be successful in some cases. And this is why these so-called credential stuffing attacks are quite a good technique right now for hackers just to gain access to accounts. However, we need to protect our users in some way, of course. And many online services are just offering two-factor authentication in that case. But the problem is here that the user acceptance is really, really low. Google themselves, they really had to say that less than 10% of their active Google users have just opted in for two-factor authentication. And that's a very low number. And we need to protect these 90% that don't have two-factor authentication enabled. And this is where risk-based authentication comes into play. This technology is just used to increase the security of passwords with minimal impact on the user interaction. And this works as follows. I'm just typing in my normal username and password, and when I submit the login form, I'm also submitting additional metadata that is just available in the context. This could be, for example, what kind of IP address am I using, what's the device I'm using, and so on. And in the backend, we're just calculating based on previous logins the risk, how highly it is that this login attempt is a hacking attempt. This is just normally categorized into low, medium, and high risk. If we just take a low risk example, I'm just signing in from my university computer as always with similar devices. And in this case, I'm just getting signed in as always. Just taking another example, I'm just switching the location, and I'm using a device I've never used before, and the location has never been seen before in my case. And in this case, RBA is not sure if it's really Stefan Wiefling. And in this case, they're just asking for an additional authentication factor. This could be, for example, because it's stored anyway, the email address to confirm. And if I can give them the proof correctly, then I'm getting signed in into the website. And you can see the differences here between two-factor authentication and risk-based authentication. You're not always asked for additional authentication. Risk-based authentication is recommended in the NIST Digital Identity Guidelines. If you haven't read the identity guidelines before, just read it. It's really worth it. And also big online services are using it. We just figured out in the previous study that LinkedIn are using it, Facebook, Amazon, Google are using it. So the big players are using it. However, there could be some usability problems because we have these unpredictable system behavior, because you're sometimes prompted for additional authentication and sometimes you're not. And this is why we designed a usability study just to investigate the usability and security perceptions of risk-based authentication. We set up a website that is just similar to a cloud storage website, and we introduced it as an external website to our participants. So we invited participants just to test our website here, our cloud storage website. We just did that, of course, to avoid a bias. So we just said, yeah, it's an external website, and just test it for us. On this website, users could upload and download data and also share sensitive data, like uploading a picture, which is a sensitive data in Germany. They're registered with their private email address and device, so to create a realistic study scenario. And after that, they signed in into the website multiple times as a secondary task. And when they signed in, they perceived one of 4 authentication methods, each per participant. If we're just in the two-factor authentication condition here, You were always asked for additional authentication, so similar to classical two-factor authentication. We also tested two different risk-based authentication methods. One was always triggered when the device was different, and the other one was triggered when the location was different. And also to compare it with classical password-only authentication, we also had a condition where we were never asked for additional authentication, so similar to password-only. In our study, we designed 7 tasks because we had some challenges here. Because we know that authentication is a secondary task, so you solve some challenges like uploading data on a cloud storage service, and when you're doing that, the authentication comes into the way. So it's always a secondary task. So we designed some tasks and also introduced a fictional business scenario to create a realistic study scenario. The participants solved these 7 tasks in our study. Authentication was always a secondary task, and we introduced some sensitive data tasks like uploading and downloading sensitive data to increase the perceived security. And we also had location changes here. So they solved these tasks on 3 devices. 1 they knew, and 2 they didn't have used before. And we had 2 location changes. And to support our participants in perceiving different location changes, we introduced room changes. The first room they perceived was just a normal room for our students, so they knew what to expect. And when they switched to the other room during the study, it was the most beautiful room ever. There was no such comparable room in our university. Just trust us. And so just to increase the sense to location change impression here to understand them. After they solved these tasks, we wanted to figure out how is actually the perception of these methods. So we first asked our participants to solve an exit survey. We did that to measure the usability and security perceptions. And after that, we wanted to figure out why did people cross certain answers. So we had a semi-structured interview after solving the exit survey. And these are our results. We had 65 persons and participants who finished the study. They were more skewed to a male population, but we also had female persons and participants here. And we measured also the system usability scale, which is a standardized questionnaire to measure usability. There were 10 questions, and based on the answers, we calculated a score between 0 and 100. The higher the score, the higher the usability. And you can see here on the graph that the usability of RBA and password-only authentication was significantly higher than those of two-factor authentication. Also, in terms of user acceptance, RBA was significantly higher accepted than two-factor authentication that we tested here. But however, the acceptance differs. So it differs if you have a different sensitivity in data in the website use case scenario, and it differs from the re-authentication factor. So we asked if you just had to authenticate via email, the acceptance was overall pretty high. And when they had to offer a phone number, the acceptance really went down. So it really declined for phone numbers. This could be a German speciality, but however, also in app-based re-authentication, it was also less accepted, except for online banking. There you can see that two-factor authentication was also very highly accepted here. Also, some reasons why certain risk-based authentication methods were accepted or rejected in several scenarios here. One reason was the trust in the online service. It was a factor influencing. There was a person that had negative experiences with a social media website where they were just bugged again and again, although this person just offered a phone number just for authentication purposes. So it was a bad experience here. So it was a low acceptance. Also, the device was a factor influencing. So this person just wanted to use Netflix to watch some series, and RBA was active then. And I think it's a dumb idea to re-authenticate. I don't know if you have an email re-authentication method on your television screen. I guess you don't have it, so it wasn't a good idea. So device is also a factor influencing. Regarding the security, the perceived security was significantly higher when you were triggered for re-authentication at least once. So it was the security was significantly higher than password-only authentication, and comparable RBA and 2FA were comparable here. We also found an issue here when re-authenticating. We asked our participants, the website asked our participants to re-authenticate via email, so they signed in via Gmail. Some of them did because they used their private email address. And however, Google has also risk-based authentication, and in this test where the devices changed, Google also asked for additional authentication. And if people don't have the device with them, it could be a problem because they couldn't re-authenticate. And the problem here is that some of our participants really had the problem here, and they did not expect that RBA was triggered with Google. So they couldn't re-authenticate in that case. So as a result, we conclude that the usability of risk-based authentication is significantly higher than second factor authentication, and the security, the perceived security, is also significantly higher than password-only authentication. But you really need to be careful about how you implement risk-based authentication. So at the end, we would say you should consider using risk-based authentication on websites with sensitive data involved. Only exception is online banking. As you saw before, the two-factor authentication is widely accepted in terms of online banking. Re-authentication via email is also widely accepted for RBA. However, you really need to be aware of deadlocks, as you saw before. Perhaps consider using different re-authentication methods that could be solved without. You always need to consider what to ask for in risk-based authentication. So at the end, thank you very much for listening. If you got any questions, just drop me a line. I'm also on Twitter as well. And we also have our website, riskbasedauthentication.org, where you can find more information about our studies, because we did multiple studies here, which could be very interesting for you. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your questions.